In our last chat, we talked about the how-to of a behavioural assessment interview. You mentioned the STARL method. What would be really great is if you gave us an example of
Sure.
the STARL method applied.
Yep.
One of the common situations is starting something new. So can you tell us how you'd apply that in asking behavioural questions?
Yeah. This comes up a lot because in most scenarios, people are going to be expected to come up with something from scratch. So it's a really good one to use. So typically what you want to do is, as I said before in previous conversations, we want to really get a broad general question to start off with. So you might ask something along the lines of, we'd really like to know about a time where you had to start something from scratch. There hadn't been anything done along this line before, and you had to come up with an idea or a program or a strategy on your own that you developed from scratch. Can you please tell me about an example of where you had to do that? So that's a very broad, that's kind of asking for the situation. So hopefully that gives enough information to the interviewees to start, thinking in their mind about what it is they've done that fits that description. Just a brief caveat here, though. Sometimes you'll find there's a tendency with some people to give very old, dusty examples, and that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes that example can be very useful. The difficulty I have, though, with too many old examples rather than recent examples is people do slowly over time learn, especially if they're adept and agile, to improve the way they do things. And so something that I may have done 5, 6, 7 years ago may not necessarily still be as good a predictor of what I'm going to do in the next couple of years or the next couple of months. Whereas a more recent example is probably going to be a better predictor of what I'm going to do in the future. So just as an aside, as you're going through this process, the STAR process, if you feel like you're getting too many of those old examples, say, that's interesting, that's a good example. Can you give me one that's maybe more recent, something in the last 12 months, for example? So you've asked the broad question, and hopefully you've gotten an initial description by that person. Oh yeah, there was a time where we were trying to plant a church in a new community. Have never been involved in that community before. So I pulled a team of guys together, and we talked about how are we going to basically attack this. So okay, good general response. Is that enough? Probably not. So we're going to want to know more information. So okay, that's good. Planting a new church in a community that didn't have a church before. Getting an idea here, he's pulling people together, so there's a sense that he understands the importance of leveraging input from others. He's not just a lone ranger. Good information, but probably not enough for me to feel confident that he's actually going to be able to go to the wire with this one. So okay, that's good. So what was your actual goal? Can you be more specific about the goal? Oh, right, yeah. Well, actually, what we decided is we just wanted to start a youth outreach program. Okay, now I'm getting more specifics. Now I understand the actual task. We want to start a youth outreach program in this community where there's been little to no Christian presence before. Good. But what did you actually do? Tell me about what you specifically did. Now we're into the A. What actions did you take? So then the individual will probably start recounting, okay, yeah, well, first of all, we did this, this, and this. And this is usually where people get into the rhythm, and they're starting to recount specific events that took place, and they're telling you about all the great things they did to be able to get this community youth program going. Again, the risk here is it something they actually did, or is it something that people around them did? So while on the one hand, we're encouraged by the fact that the individual is operating with a team and they're leveraging others, which is a good leadership attribute, we also want to know, though, what did they specifically do to help keep things moving? Or did they just basically hand it off, sit back, and everybody else carried the load? So fine-tuning those actions to things they specifically did versus things others did is important.
Yep.
So you might end up with a lot of good information there. And this is probably where most people would say, I've got enough of an answer. But we really don't know the result yet. And so we have to remember we need to basically put a bow around this. So we need to follow it up with a final question, which is, so what was the actual result? And hopefully it's going to be something along the lines of, well, it took us quite a while. It was a lot harder than we realized. Then you might ask, what were the challenges? Little sidestep. How did they learn from those challenges? But ultimately you'll get back to 18 months down the road, we actually had a little youth group going. We had 12 kids from the community there, and they might describe a little bit about what that looked like. That's a nice, and that'll take you a while, which is another point. Don't go in with too many questions up your sleeve. Select the handful of key behaviors that you want to assess. If you need to spread it out over a couple of interviews, so be it. You're better off getting good quality detailed responses to a smaller number of behavioral questions than rattling off a whole bunch of 12, 15 behaviors that you want to assess in one interview.
Yep.
Excuse me. And all you're getting is very short, pat answers. So just keep that in mind too. It's okay for there to be a fair bit of time taken to really get, in my view, to really get a solid answer.
And then finally, the L.
Yeah, so the L is something I add on. It's not part of the classic STAR model, but over the years, I've learned to really appreciate the importance of people learning from things they've done in the past. And sometimes they learn from mistakes. And I think it's great when people can talk about those. It shows honesty, it shows transparency, shows a degree of humility, which I think are good attributes in any person. And so what we're trying to assess there is, all right, that's interesting. So what did you learn from that? What would you do differently next time? Now, that's a little bit of a hypothetical, but I think in this case, it's allowed. It's better if you can say, what did you do next time when it happened? And if they can then give you another behavioral example of where they learned from the first and applied in the second, that's the ideal.
Yep.
They may not have actually had a second opportunity yet, so it might be a little hypothetical, but it's still good to know, did you learn anything?
Yep. Looking forward to hearing more from you about the getting towards an outcome and understanding the outcome in our next video.
Look forward to it.